I am so honored to have our guest. Like, this has been a guest that I've been looking forward to having since we started the series. She is the true definition of going from an assistant to the CEO. Please give it up for one of the baddest women in business, Miss Dia Sims. Goodness. Now, understand something. When I told a lot of my peers and a lot of my friends who I was having this week, everybody had the same reaction, like, oh, you got a big one. So I actually started to get nervous. I'm like, oh my God, like, I got to be buttoned up, super prepared. So Dia, number one, and this is just all honesty, I'm so excited to have you, because I have watched you rise through the ranks and you have just blown past everybody. That's number one. But number two, you are our first woman to ever grace the Powermove Maker stage.
Ooh la la, yes. It's past due, you late.
We know Dia takes her time serious, so we're gonna get right into it.
Thank you.
And Dia, just so you know, Dia was here an hour early.
Yes.
Everybody is usually 15, 20 minutes late, so I wasn't expecting that.
No, look, let's be clear. If press calls, anywhere in the world, I'm there, early.
Dee, I want to take it back to the beginning.
Yes.
Coming up, what you want to be?
I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew I wanted to have the freedom to do what I wanted to do with my time. So I actually grew up in East Elmhurst, Queens, which it was a neighborhood where there was a lot of up-and-coming hip-hop at the time. Like, I was maybe like 9 or 10, but Salt and Pepper, Kid and Play, Kwame, Herbie Lovebug, they all lived near me. So I would be like 9 seeing Salt and Pepper practice in the next backyard all the time, like over and over and over again. And of course at 9, I didn't really realize it, but I don't think it's a coincidence that I ended up working in this industry for really Herbie Lovebug in East Elmhurst was a precursor to what Puff became.
Wow, wow. Family dynamic, mom, dad, 2-family household?
Yes, so I grew up, mom, dad, still together to this day.
Beautiful.
My dad is like brilliant. He was a New York police officer, and it's actually an interesting story. Like, where he grew up, he was really smart, he was handsome, he could sing, but he grew up in the environment where like his aunts would be like, you could do all that. If you really try hard, you could be a pimp one day. Like, I mean, like that was like, if you really like all those skills. So for him, like to come out of that, and he grew up also in a neighborhood where like they hated the police, right? No different than it is today, where he would see people being wrongly jailed, wrongly imprisoned, set up, beat up, killed. So it was somewhat counterintuitive for him to come out of originally in the military to go into the New York police force. But he said to me, even as a kid, so if you want to change something, you have to change it from within. So he became a police officer. He actually went on to start the first division in the New York, in the NYPD Internal Affairs that was strictly focused on training officers and how they need to have appropriate interactions and treat Black and Spanish neighborhoods with civility, put a protocol in place. Obviously, a lot of that has obviously gone to the wayside. He's retired now, but it was an important example for me, I think, growing up to see like the best way to change something is actually to become a part of it.
Wow, that's a great advice. Was education big in your household?
It was, but I will say, I think a lot of, at least when I was growing up, I grew up in an environment where everyone was, you get your job, you go to college, and it would be amazing if you become a doctor or lawyer, or you take, in New York, I was still a kid, it was like take every city test, right? What was not really encouraged, which I would really encourage everybody in this room, anybody under the sound of our voices, is really to look at entrepreneurship. That to me, that wasn't something I was talked a lot about, even though, to the point about the people I saw Play open up a barbershop. I saw these guys, I saw this thing that was like a cool hobby, all of a sudden, like, damn, they got a whole movie called House Party in every theater around the United States. Like, this is just my neighbors doing something fun, and now it's a global phenomenon. I think, so I think it was seeping into me like by osmosis, but it was not drilled into me the way I feel like it is in other cultures. I'll talk a lot about the difference between actual innovation and like a small improvement, and how like iPhones didn't come from, y'all probably don't even know, but from like Palm Pilots, or, you know what I'm saying, Netflix didn't come from Blockbuster. I think it's the same thing with, we want to see real diversity, we want to have real ownership. It may not come from getting the best job. It may come from like you starting your own thing, or 5 of you getting together. And that could be whatever. Be the best nail tech, get the cleaning, whatever it is. But owning it is something that is different than just being, not there's anything wrong with having a great job, but I think that the one thing that was missing for me that I'll say as loudly as much as I can is look at entrepreneurship as a path.
Wow. Coming up, where'd you go to school?
So
college in particular.
Oh, college. I went to undergraduate. I went to Morgan State in Baltimore, and I got my master's degree from a school called Florida Institute of Technology. I used to work for the Department of Defense, negotiating defense contracts, which is a long story.
Is that your first job out of college?
That was my first job out of college.
Before we go there, what'd you major in?
I majored in psychology.
Okay. Both undergrad and grad?
My master's degree was in management.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me, first job out of college.
My first job out of college was Department of Defense. I went to school in Maryland, and again, way before your time, but there in the late 80s, there was a big scandal where Department of Defense was caught spending like $550 on like a $3 hammer, and it was, or like $700 on a regular $49.99 toilet. So the Department of Defense was under all this scrutiny. LA Times had done an expose, a whole bunch of things happened. So I graduated 10 years later. They finally put a program in place where they were like, we're gonna go out and get talented graduates, strong GPAs, who have a particular work ethic, and we're gonna hire them to work for the federal government. When you work for the government, you have like these pay bands, right? So you're like a GS5, GS7. This program, they will hire you and you get to skip like 5 grades in 3 years, but they'll train you like crazy. So I had like secret clearance, which was very cool, which expired, but you can try to secrets with me. But the most important thing was they sent me to be trained in negotiations for literally 2 years. And to this day, particularly I would say this to the women, it's an incredibly important skill that has come in handy in every job, with my 6-year-old for bedtime, with my husband, with what movie, when I'm negotiating with Puff on my next raise. Like, you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, it was the best first job you could have coming out of college. And like, the skills of understanding how to negotiate with somebody should not be some esoteric special skill, right? I actually feel like we should be teaching it in like 1st and 2nd grade so that we understand how to understand our value and then package it up in exchange for what you deserve.
That's amazing. I didn't know this. They actually sent you away for 2 years to learn?
Not away for 2 years, but part of it would be like you work for 2 weeks, then you go to class for 2 weeks. You know what I mean?
Really?
And learn about, yes,
the
about
art of
procurement.
negotiation.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so I know you did promotion in
Yes.
DC.
Yes.
Where does that fall into play? Were you doing promotion while you were at the Department of Defense, or is it
so many
after?
jobs. So I was I left the program early because at some point it got a little bit boring.
Okay.
So I started off with the Navy and Naval Air, and in defense, air is kind of the more, you see the movies, like more the exciting. But I was in this very small town, and I was a New Yorker at that time, and this was a town where literally like horses would cross the street in the middle of the day. This whole base had just moved there, so more street lights were being added, and the town was in an uproar, like all these street lights and cars, and this town is about to turn, they were scared they were gonna turn to the next town, which to me was like still a small town. So it just got boring as like a young woman. I was like, I'm gonna transfer to DC. The agency that I transferred to was very slow. And they would give me projects that I would literally complete in a week that would be like due months later. And I was like, this is just not for me. So I left, and at the time I actually got into advertising sales at a radio station in Maryland. But when I started getting my chops in understanding marketing more and how to sell is when I got into promotion. So me and a group of my friends, some other young ladies, we used to throw parties in DC, and they were big. They were like 1,000 people every week. And it was just another great entrepreneurial way to just get some extra cash in your pocket and build a lot of relationships.
So slowly but surely, you are seeping into the world of entrepreneurship. Now, are you working in DC? Is this with Mark Barnes?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
So this is, Mark Barnes, for any of you guys who don't know, is probably the biggest promoter ever in DC, would you say?
Definitely, yeah.
You know, had his own club, big time guy. Working with Mark Barnes, what did you learn?
Mark is like, literally, I would try to hire people who used to work for Mark to work for Puff. Like, he's like the perfect training ground. He's a real perfectionist. So and he's a consummate host. It was very similar to Puff. Like, he really cared when you came into one of his clubs. It wasn't just like, I'm gonna make a nightclub and I just want you to come and play the music real loud. He took so much pride in the fact that, like, if you came into his club on a Monday at 2 p.m., it's gonna be spotless. The food that he serves is amazing and delicious. The way you conducted yourself and interacted with his guest, he took extremely seriously, and it would take us to, like, I'm gonna take you to the Four Seasons, see how they treat you here. I'm gonna take you to St. Regis, see now you need to embody that when you are, we were just promoters for him at that time before I did work for him for a while too. There was a couple other things that I feel like I really learned there. When I worked for him, it was a relatively small, it was a place called Republic Gardens and the U Street corridor in DC. And it was a very popular place, but it was relatively small. But at some point, he asked me to start helping the managers bar, so I got to kind of see the books. And I started doing the math in my head, and I was like, oh, he's making millions of dollars every year. I didn't even realize, so I was young, and I was like, wait, hold on. This is like $7-8 million. And it just never really occurred to me. It was like the first time I realized, like, oh, I could just make millions of dollars if you just really just think about the math of what it takes kind of person by person. So I really started being conscious of, like, 500 people at this amount, 3 drinks on average, and thinking about how was I gonna build my personal story every time I spent my time with a real math-based approach. I think the second thing, and I take this like forever in the way I hire people, was he would take us all, the group of us, around to different restaurants, or we may have to go to Home Depot because we were building out a tent for a big event. He was looking for talent everywhere. So it didn't necessarily matter if you had the exact experience. You didn't have to previously be a cocktail waitress to be a cocktail waitress for him. You didn't have to previously be promoted to promote for him. If we were at Home Depot and he noticed that the cash register woman on aisle 10 was moving crazy fast, she remembered everybody's name. Hey, Bob, from such and such contractor. She was doing the math in her head. She put a bow on the bag. He would be like, we need to talk to her. We need to hire her and put her on the register. We'll train her. She has what we're looking for in terms of an approach, right? And an intensity and a pride in her work. And to this day, I'm not necessarily always looking for people that have the specific technical skills. I'm more like, will they be able to rock in this environment? Are they, like, for me, I actually really care. I think you've probably seen me with this. Are they, like, not assholes? Like, literally in my culture decks, it says, like, this is an asshole-free zone. You can't be good enough to be here because I'm not working with somebody 20 hours a day. That's, like, a problem for the rest of the team. So, like, we're gonna work hard. We don't expect bullshit, but we can say please, and we can say thank you, and we can be kind to one another. And I learned that lesson from him, I think, in my mid-20s.
Oh, these are great lessons to learn. And for the people in the room, and also the people who are gonna watch this around the globe via YouTube or where have you, these lessons, it just goes to show you, no matter where you start, you can develop a skill set that's gonna benefit you because you're talking about things that you picked up 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That serve you today. So that's amazing. Tell me your transition from DC to New York.
So
Back to New York, rather.
Yeah, so I was also doing pharmaceutical sales because I was like, okay, I like promoting, but I like health benefits. How can I do both, right? So I got a job doing pharmaceutical sales during the day, and I was still promoting in the evenings. And 9/11 happened.
Okay.
And I was like the only person that moved back to New York because it was such a scary time. And I just was like, you know what, whatever happens, I want to be near my family. You know what I mean? So I actually left Maryland, came up to New York, and I took a job in pharmaceutical sales up here in the South Bronx in Washington Heights.
So you come back to New York.